Hey friends, welcome back to Fantasy Wash. It's been, and I'm happy to be back. I am a little bit late for this already, but it's better late than never. And today I am going to be doing my July and August wrap up. Let's jump in. As you can see, the setup is slightly different. I have expanded my bookshelves. If you are interested in seeing as to what they completely look like, I can link that. But I'm gonna be playing around with a few different settings until I find, settings being positions really, until I find where exactly it is I wanna be. Let me know what you think would be the best setup visually so you can see all the books, all the shelves, what you would like to see, curious in general. But today I am going to be talking, like I said, about my July books, even though it is September, and the month of August. I read 10 books collectively between the 2 months. It was my slowest time of the year. I just found that I was in a really big rut following Dark Age and Malice, and I just couldn't find my rhythm. I also went back home to Montreal for a week, which was amazing. I did a vlog about it. I hope you'll check that out. But let's jump into what the books were and what I thought about them. Before we continue, however, there's a new little member to the Fantasy Wash family, and this is Thackeray Binks. Hello, Thackeray Binks. He is 4.5 months of absolute perfection. He is the sweetest little thing. He's also been playing with the wires while I've been trying to record. So that's a little side. So the first book that I read in the month of July was When the Moon Hatched by Sarah Parker. This was previously an independently published book. It seems like it has now been picked up and is going to be published via Trad. I think the sequel will be only Trad. I'm not entirely sure as to what the nuances of that deal are going to be, but When the Moon Hatched is a romantasy, and I saw a lot of positives about it online. I will say that I think Sarah Parker has very beautiful prose. This story is one that has resonated with a lot of people. It's one that just didn't necessarily click with me. Not everything is gonna work, but it wasn't my favorite start to anything. But I then jumped into a reread because I desperately felt like I needed something just to bolster my spirit. And I ended up rereading ACOTAR again. I read all of them except the first book. So I read A Court of Mist and Fury, A Court of Wing and Ruin, A Court of Frost and Starlight. I needed to just check my notes there because I very seldom remember the name of the novella, and A Court of Silver Flames. Now, when I had read this on my first read and every subsequent reread, I only read the novella once, which is A Court of Frost and Starlight, and I will say it wasn't my favorite book ever. However, this time I went in and I listened to the graphic audio, which really brought the story to life for me in a whole new way. I know that ACOTAR is contentious for a lot of people. However, it's a series that I have grown to really love. It's become a comfort read for me, especially this year because this is when I started reading it. And of course, I've read it several times this year already. It's been pretty much nonstop, but I will likely read it again before the end of the year. Who knows? It just has been a really great gift in a year that has been rather turbulent for me. So I appreciate it for that. And I loved rereading it. I loved refamiliarizing myself with the world, just enjoying it, having a good time, and enjoying myself. The next book that I read was the book club book for the Fantasy Wash with Laura and Josh book club for the month of July, and that was The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. This book, I had a lot of interesting thoughts about this book going into it. I was told to basically turn my brain off for the first 60 or so pages, and if you know me well, if you know me not that well, that doesn't work for me. I am not someone that can turn my brain off. It's an ADD brain. It's going nonstop all the time. But for me, I think rather than telling people to turn their brain off for the beginning of this book, what we need to be telling people is to read this the same way that they would read an epic. And what I mean by that is similarly to how they would read the Odyssey or the Iliad or the Aeneid. The scope of this is very, very vast. It is performative. It is transportive. It is a very superlative book in many ways. It, for me, was not my favorite book of the year, but it was an excellent read. I found that the first part really was the most troubling for me to get through. I knew that there were several trigger warnings for this book specifically. I'm not going to get into them, but there is some violence, there's some gore. This doesn't sit well with a lot of people. It didn't bother me in the slightest had there been an animal involved. However, that's when stuff would have been very dicey and tricky. But no, I really did enjoy Spear Cuts Through Water. It was unlike anything that I've read in a very, very long time. I found that for me, it had a lot of similarities to the Epic of Gilgamesh. I have a video specifically on the Epic of Gilgamesh if you're interested. I feel like there are relationships and structures to said relationships and the way that animals are incorporated into the story that felt very similar to the epic. So it wouldn't surprise me if Simon had taken some of his inspiration for the stories from there. I think that his prose were absolutely beautiful. The book it's just so interestingly written in that it's written in the first, second, and third person, and you understand why he uses all of those tenses, and it was very strange while in the midst of reading it. However, by the time I got to the end, I very much appreciated the way in which he told the story, how he told the story. This is a love story in a few different ways. It is a love of one's country, one's culture, one's history, and simultaneously it is a love story between two people. It is not a traditional love story by any means, but it is one that I very much enjoyed. I then went back and I reread my girl, Emily Henry, again, because I felt like after Spear, I needed something that I knew I would love, I knew was comfort, and that was gonna be relatively simple and easy for me to digest. I didn't reread all of Emily Henry. I started with Funny Story, which is her book that came out this past year, and I love this book. I've talked endlessly about Emily Henry. I created a book club about Emily Henry on the channel, even though she's contemporary romance and has nothing to do with fantasy. I couldn't help it. I love the way that Emily Henry tells stories. She is such a beautiful character author. I love the way that I feel that I so intimately know people by the end of the book, not even by the end of the book, by a third of the way through the book, I understand why Daphne is the way that she is and why Miles ticks the way that he does. And the story is one that is very funny, and it takes place initially at the very beginning in Richmond, Virginia, which is a place that I have lived. It then transports us to this mythical town that doesn't exist and is fictitious in Michigan, where Daphne is left by her fiance Peter for his childhood best friend Petra, who simultaneously leaves her long-term boyfriend Miles. Daphne and Miles end up in a living situation together and start fake dating in order to get back at their exes. It's very funny. I enjoyed it. It is one of those stories too where it deals with a lot of deeper themes like abandonment issues and family trust issues, and I always appreciate that Emily Henry gives us something to latch on to with each of our characters, specifically both love interests, and just makes me feel so invested in each and both of their stories. That then transferred my next read, because all of her reads are like this, and I went back to Beach Read because Beach Read is one of hers that I haven't reread, and when I read it initially, it was a 5-star read for me, and on the reread, it was a 4-star read, but it's not a bad book by any means. It's just that I love some of her other books so much more. Specifically, Happy Place is still far and away my favorite. I adore Happy Place, and I have to be in the right headspace to read it, because even though it is titled Happy Place, it is such an emotional read for me. I know if I read it that I'm going to be crying at several points throughout the book. She's just such a gifted author, and I love what she offers. But Beach Read is about two authors. They are college rivals, Gus and January, who have not seen each other since college, who have both gone on to have successful careers, and both end up once again in Michigan in this small town where they end up as neighbors. And it is a really beautiful story of unpacking trauma that happens to us as children, trauma that happens to us as adults that we weren't privy to as children. Specifically what's going on in the lives of our parents and how that affects us, and we don't really know about the full context of things because we can't quite grasp what's going on as kids as we can as adults. And I just loved the story of Gus and January. I love that Emily Henry incorporates literature, writing books into her story. She does it so well. And that is one of the best examples of that for her storytelling. So I really enjoyed it. And the final one that I read of Emily Henry was People We Meet on Vacation. People We Meet on Vacation is actually being adapted. All of her stuff is being adapted, but I think it's the one that is going to be adapted first. They announced the actors for it most recently. Emily Bader, I believe, is the actress that is going to be playing the female lead, who is Poppy, and I really loved her from having just watched My Lady Jane, because I read My Lady Jane a few months ago, just to plug that in here. It was a really fun read, but I really adored people we meet on vacation. I know this is not everyone's cup of tea. A lot of people are pretty on the fence about this book. It seems to be one of her most polarizing, if not the most polarizing book, specifically because Poppy can be a really hard to digest character. It is a friends to lovers romance. However, it takes us over the journey of 11 summers and these trips that these friends have had with each other and how this is likely their last trip. And they have been on the outs for the last couple of years since an incident that happened on their second to last trip, and it is a retelling of how people form relationships, what those relationships mean to us, and how our past can affect our relationships going forward. It is a really great read. I really love it. Friends to Lovers is something that is special to my heart. A lot of people know this on the channel, but I was friends with my husband for several years before we decided to pursue a romantic relationship and evidently get married. But I love Poppy and Alex's story. Their humor, Alex's humor, especially in this book, is just so good. I really love this story. I hope people give it a try. Even if it's not your favorite Emily Henry, I hope that Emily Henry becomes an author for you. Maybe it's the gateway to trying more other Emily Henry stories to see if they work for you. But really, she's just such a gifted and talented author that I think we should all be singing her praises if it's not clear. The next book that I read, I wanted to have a fantasy that pulled me in because I felt like nothing had been working for me in a little while in terms of fantasy reads and new fantasy reads, and I really wanted something. So the one that I settled on was The Will of the Many by James Islington, which I have right here. The Will of the Many by James Islington, and I looked it up. It is James Islington, not James Islington, because the audiobook for this actually said James Islington, and I thought that's what it was until I said it on another video, and someone corrected me because Mike from Mike's Book Review did an interview with him, and he actually confirmed it's Islington. That's a long tangent, but here we are. I ended up really liking The Will of the Many. It was a very unique setting. I liked the magic system. I found that the story at the beginning was very reminiscent of the first few books of the Red Rising saga series, whatever you want to call it. I will refer to the first three as the trilogy because those are the ones that I really love. And I found that the story just pulled me in pretty much from the get-go. It has Roman influence in terms of the structure of, I don't necessarily want to call it government, but it sort of is. It is their structure of government, the language that's used. There's a lot of Latin in this book. And we learn from the onset that our main character, Vis, is someone who is kind of hiding in plain sight, and there's a lot more going on to him than is beneath the surface. This is a very good example of the fantasy school setting, that trope, which I eat up. I friggin' love it. So I had a great time with this. It was also my first, I think I said my first book by James Islington. I am really excited now to read the Lycanos trilogy, even though I know it's more of that epic fantasy, which I tend to struggle with a little bit of it. If you know this channel and you've followed along, that is not my typical lean in comfort read. I tend to struggle with that a little bit more unless it's Stormlight, because I really love Stormlight. But I really enjoyed this book. I am so excited to see where he goes with book 2. There was something at the end of it that I didn't super love. It kind of ends on a shocking ending, on a cliffhanger. And sometimes I really love that, as long as there, I feel, have been appropriate clues and breadcrumbs that have been dropped along the way. For me, there weren't enough, and that's just a me thing probably, because it seems that the majority of people have absolutely loved it. So all in all, very excited to read book 2. The next book that I read was another new author to me, and that was Jay Kristoff, and I read Nevernight. I ended up enjoying Nevernight. It was not something that was really on my radar, except when I did my Love Bomb chat with Theo from Rekindled Reader, he was telling me about Nevernight and thought that I might like it, so I decided to give it a go. I liked the book well enough. The one thing I struggled with in this book that I struggle with many books is that the protagonist to me felt too young for the story that was being told. I understand why he chose to do it that way, but for me, I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I don't want to read about 16, 17, and 18-year-olds anymore. I want older protagonists. I want to feel like there are more people reflective of me and my age. I would love more protagonists in fantasy in their 30s, specifically women that aren't just these dead moms that exist in fantasy. But In Nevernight, it is once again sort of that fantasy school setting. However, it is a school for assassins. I found aspects of this story to be believable. I found other aspects of this story really hard to pull me in. I liked what he did with some of the magic, like the Knot Cat and shadow work in this book. I thought that was really great. And I liked some of the side characters very, very much. But I have decided not to continue on with the series, at least not right now. It's not one that was grabbing my attention enough. I know that a lot of people love this series, and I do intend to try Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff to see if that is something that resonates maybe with me a little bit more. But all in all, happy I read it. It has good humor in it, especially at certain points. The narrator is excellent, and I really enjoyed the audiobook for this one. And the last book for me that I started in the month of August, but I didn't finish, I finished it, I believe, the 1st of September, was The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. I will talk more about it in my wrap up for September, but if you want to hear my thoughts immediately on it, you can go to the book club discussion I had with Josh about it. We ended up enjoying ourselves. It was a really fun conversation. And those were the books that I read for July and August. In regards to other things that have been going on, I don't know if you can hear it in my voice. I'm quite sick, but it's been so long, and I really did want to actually sit down and record something for you guys because I feel odd when I haven't put a video out in a while, and it's been a while. Summer for me tends to be a time where I try to slow down a little bit more, be a bit more reflective of what it is that I'm doing with my time and my energy. I ended up spending a lot more time outside with my daughter this summer, which was great. Like I said, I went home to Montreal, which I desperately needed. I needed to reconnect with my friends, my home, just myself. It was very important to me, and it's so important to new parents in general, and I'm counting new parents pretty much up until like the age of 4, because sometimes we just get so caught up in it that it's hard to disentangle ourselves from our parent selves and remember that we were people before we were parents. We had dreams, aspirations, ideas, thoughts, and wants and desires and things to do. And it's wonderful to kind of reconnect with that part of yourself, which is also what I've been doing with my writing. I have been working on my drafts still. I am going to be getting more line edits done pretty soon. I am pretty happy with where things are right now. I've restructured my book pretty significantly. I felt like it needed it, and I'm happy with how it's coming along. It's just been more work than I was possibly anticipating. I've had several other ideas swirling around that I'm excited to put on paper. I just feel like I need to complete this project first before I can move into anything else and then start retconning some of the things that I had worked into book 2, because timelines now are going to be changed from book 1 to book 2 a little bit. So that'll be fun to work on. But all in all, I had a good summer. Like I said, Thackeray Binks joined our family. I've got my new shelves here. It's been slow changes, slow developments, but all in all, we had a very good summer. And I am so excited for fall. I am all about that cooler weather. I can't wait. I am super excited. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. As always, I super appreciate it. If you'd like to keep up with what I'm reading in real time, you can of course follow me on Instagram or Goodreads. If you would like to help support the channel, you can always hit like, subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you have read over the last couple of months. If you'd like to go even further in helping to support the channel, you can always join our Patreon, where we chat, hang out, talk about the book club book. You can vote on the book club books that you want. We've got a couple of really fun options coming up for October. We're really leaning into the season is all I'm gonna say. It's really fun. And this month's book is going to be Piranesi, which is absolutely one of my favorite books. So I'm so excited to discuss it again and have Josh finally read it. But yeah, that's pretty much all that's been going on here. I'm hoping to be a bit more regular and frequent with posting again. I appreciate you coming back and hanging out with me if it's been a couple months since you've seen me here. Like I said, if you think this kind of setup works, let me know. If you think I should angle the camera a little bit more like I normally had it, or if I should be more on an angle with the corner, the L in the corner, let me know. I'm curious to try a few things out until we finally see what feels the most right. But Again, thanks for spending your time with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.